This is part 2 of Chapter 53's lecture, and we're going to begin here with the discussion of dispersion. So previously we were discussing density of populations. Now we're going to look at how populations are spaced out. And essentially ecologists look at the spacing in 3 different types of formations, either a clumped, a uniform, or a random spacing. And whether a population is clumped or uniform or random is going to be determined by both environmental and social factors that are going to really play a big role in how spaced out the individuals get. For example, a clump dispersion can be influenced by the availability of resources. So here we have an example, or a few different examples, of clumped patterns of dispersion. And as you can see here, the clump dispersion has a lot to do with the resource availability. So, for example, with these flowers here growing in the bottom right-hand corner, most likely the nutrient and perhaps water availability is highest where these have chosen to clump. And so that patch of aggregation is being determined by the biotic factors that are going to help that population grow and be healthy. So plants or fungi are very often clumped where soil conditions or other environmental factors are going to favor germination and growth. For example, mushrooms will be clumped on a rotting log. And many animals spend a lot of their time in a specific microenvironment, like the buffalo that you see on the hillside, that satisfies or meets their requirements for food. Like forest insects and salamanders will frequently clump under logs where the humidity tends to be higher than in the more exposed area, since they want to maintain a moist skin. The clumping of animals can also be associated with mating behavior. For example, mayflies will swarm in great numbers to increase their chances of mating. And this is important because mayflies survive only 1 or 2 days as reproductive adults. So it's important that they find mates quickly. Also, by clumping together, certain predators can be more effective, like a pack of wolves or a grouping of lions, a pride of lions, helps them, if they are clumped, it helps them to be better and more effective as predators. Also, clumping can help prey be more effective in avoiding predation. So fish, for example, there can help avoid predation by being clumped together, or the example you see there of the swans in the top corner. The uniform distribution is when we have exact spacing between individuals, like a specific spacing pattern. And most often you're going to find that in a population where there's a sense of defensive territoriality among these. So the resources are limited and the individuals in a population are competing against each other, and so they need a sort of defensive boundary around themselves. So oftentimes a uniform spacing or dispersion is due to the direct interaction between the individuals within a population. When we're talking about plants being uniformly dispersed, you can begin to wonder, well, how does that happen? How does defensive territoriality work with plants? And actually, it does make a lot of sense because plants need a certain amount of nutrients that they can get from the soil. They need access to sunlight. And so in some cases, a plant will secrete a chemical that inhibits the germination and growth of nearby individuals that might compete for those resources. And in that way, they get this defensive barrier or boundary around the individual plant to help it be more successful in surviving. The last type of dispersion pattern is random. And in random dispersion, the position of each individual is really independent of the other individuals. It really is not influenced one way or another by whether other individuals in the population are nearby. And so you end up with this random dispersion. So there's not really any strong attraction or repulsion, not a lot of benefit one way or the other. So if we're looking at ultimate causes for each of these dispersal patterns, you can begin to see how these serve in terms of helping or hindering reproductive success and survivability. And in random dispersion, we're finding that there really isn't any help or hindrance to being close or far away. So we'll have you stop right here, pause this video and summarize what you've learned, and write it in your notes again. Give an example of each of the main dispersion patterns. So those 3 types of dispersion patterns that you can see in populations, and talk about a possible ultimate causation of your example. So pause and get this in your notes, and then go on when you're finished with that. So the next topic that we're going to discuss is going to have to do with the demographics, which is the study of vital statistics. So demographics is important in ecology, and we don't really think about that, but demography is the study of the vital statistics of a population and how they change over time. So again, looking at the way that we have changes in the density of a population due to birth or death, immigration or emigration, all comes down to the science of demography, and the demographics are a way to display those changes. So the adding and removing of individuals from a population. And when we put that information together, we put it into what we call a life table. So you can see a life table here on why teenage boys pay high car insurance rates. And just by looking at the demographics of what happens, particularly death in this case, due to driving accidents, you can see a difference between males and females there. So when we're looking at population growth rates, we're going to be looking at life tables. We're also going to look at survivorship curves. And these are going to show the survival patterns of populations in general. Another way that we can look at growth rate is, of course, with reproductive rates. For example, at what age do females reproduce? Or how many breeding females are in the population? These are going to directly influence the reproductive rate, which is again going to affect the growth rate of a population by adding births. And the last thing that is closely related to the reproductive rate is the age structure of a population. So how many females are at reproductive age in a cohort? So what is a cohort? It's a group of individuals of the same age that are followed over a period of time. So cohorts are what are used a lot in demographics. For example, with a life table, which is an age-specific summary of the survival pattern of a population, this is often done through the study of a cohort. There's a life table that we're going to look on the next slide of a Belding's ground squirrel population that will tell you a lot about that population. So I'll have you take a look at this now. So one of the things you can see by looking at this life table is the proportion of males and females alive at each age. So it'd be good for you to pause this video and really study this life table and see what information you can get from it. Because a lot of testing in the AP Biology curriculum is going to involve your ability to look at data and analyze it. And the presentation of data in a table is one of the best ways for it to be made accessible to you. So get used to really studying, both in your book and in these lectures, any opportunity that you have to analyze data when it's presented and see what you can get out of a table is really going to be helpful. The other thing I want to point out in this table, while we're looking at one, is when you're making your own tables, there are a few things that you need to remember. So when you do a lab, you need to collect your data and you need to put it into a table. And one of the things that I want to always see in your table is a title. So you can see in this one here, it says Table 53.1, and it has a very descriptive title. It's a life table for Belding ground squirrels at Tioga Pass in Sierra Nevada of California. So it's very clearly titled. The other information is you can see the labels there. For example, age. You always want to include in both your tables and your graphs the measurement that you're using. For example, of age, the measurement being used is years, and you put that in parentheses. Okay. So this is a close-up just showing the females of the Belding ground squirrels. And I'd like you to see what sort of information you can get by looking at this. One of the things that should be very, very obvious is that there are a lot alive at the start of the year, that between the age of 0 and 1. We have 337, but by the time they are the age of 9 or 10, very few are still alive. So we have a steep drop-off in the survivability or viability of females as they age, which is not too surprising. But what is surprising is the huge drop-off and where that huge drop-off occurs. So looking at this table, you can see we start to have huge drops after the age of 2. So they survive up until age 2, but then between 2 and 3, it goes down by half, and then it goes down by half again in the next age group, and then down by half again in the next age group. So you can start to see some patterns in death rates. So what we do with the information from a life table is we put it into a survivorship curve. And that's a graphic way of modeling that data. And so here you can see the female in red, survivorship, and then the males over time. So what we have down below here is over time. So as they age, you can see their ability to survive is decreasing tremendously, and it's a pretty steady decrease. These relatively straight lines indicate that there's a relatively constant death rate, actually. So even though it looked like we had a steep decline right at the beginning, when we actually plot it out in a survivorship curve, and this is one of the advantages of actually plotting our data, we can see that it's a pretty straight line, and so we actually are having a pretty constant death rate because the slope of these two lines is reflecting a pretty constant decline. One of the things I want